Hi, everybody. It's Alyssa Finnig. I'm intuitive business coach and certified yoga therapist, and I have Sonya Chapnick here, the founder of Yoga Gently. She is also a yoga therapist and more. We're going to talk about why it's so important for deep rest, intentional pauses. And of course, Yoga Nidra is one of those ways we can do it, as well as others. But first, I would love if you could talk about just a little bit about your story and how you got here as an entrepreneur and in the holistic wellness space.
Oh, well, thank you, Alyssa. It's so nice to be here, and I'm happy to be connected with you and all the listeners out there. And yeah, we connected through Amy Wheeler and Optimal State, and that's really part of one of my biggest journeys is the Optimal State Yoga Therapy School. And as a certified yoga therapist, being in the field of yoga therapy and yoga for a very long time, I found yoga as a desperate attempt to maintain a sense of semblance and being able to move through life given a diagnosis of going blind. And so I have about 6 to 8% of my usable eyesight currently. My original, not to go deep into the story, because I feel like I've kind of done that quite a bit this year on different podcasts. But the idea that given kind of a life circumstance that was not expected and being told, the worst case scenario is you'll go blind in 3 years. And being a very young woman fresh out of college, that was pretty shocking to kind of wrap my head around. And so that really brought me to yoga and utilizing yoga as a means for being able to be okay regardless of what's going on. And I mean, it took me many, many years to get to a point where I was using it in a way that was actually supporting me and helping me thrive, as opposed to causing injuries and more of an imbalance in my life rather than moving towards balance. So that's really something that Amy Wheeler and the Optimal State Yoga Therapy School also really helped me as a yoga therapist put it into place for myself, understanding the way to reset and kind of connect with what a greater purpose is, really. And so
yeah, and Amy and her faculty are wonderful for that. I mean, I'm the faculty for the business development as well, but just knowing the students that are attracted to Amy and then how she shares her wisdom and the way the program's set up, it's one of the most phenomenal programs out there for yoga therapy.
Agreed, definitely.
Yeah. So, how long has it been since you started Yoga Gently? And, is this a newer endeavor or you've had it for a while and now you're launching a big project, which we'll talk about?
Exactly. So Yoga Gently was from pretty early on when I was shifting gears from teaching yoga and moving, from class to class and private to private and really, really working hard. I found my way into the more subtle practices of yoga and utilizing breath-centered practices from the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandram, and also finding my way into my own stillness and being able to use more directed, slower, intentional meditative practices. And that's how I came into Yoga Nidra, and that's how I found deep restorative yoga practices. And in that, really under putting into practice how when the nervous system can be at a place of ease rather than kind of being overwhelmed or fighting through life to get things done, that things kind of fall into place when you are able to take time and listen to what is really coming forth from a centered and, true listening. And so from that, I established Yoga Gently in the very late 90s.
Oh,
But I
wow.
really, it's been around for a long time, but I never really had a website. And when I started at the business development course through Optimal State, that was several years ago. I think that was where I started to shift my attention to, well, maybe my outreach can be a little bit different, because I was moving from a place of, going to people's homes and being in a public studio and things like that. And I had moved away from it quite a bit after, initially taking my teacher training and doing that whole, like, I'm gonna teach as much as possible, and I'm going to share this wisdom with every single person on the planet, not being defined very much, right? And slowly fine-tuning my skill set as a yoga therapist and working more with chronic pain management and older adults and the grief process and things like that I had great experience with as well. And so Yoga Gently really kind of solidified maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And then with the, added silver lining of the pandemic, being forced to be online and be much more creative, especially as someone who deals in a fully sighted world, but with different abilities as a partially sighted person, using screens that talk and finding people that can actually be helpful and using all of the kind of creative ways of getting things done. I found that I could have Yoga Gently be a little bit more accessible to people and help me be able to be where I could offer more, because I'm able to be more fueled for myself, not having to, go all over Los Angeles, which is where I was based.
So, is Yoga Gently, are you doing most things online now, or?
For the most part, currently, things are accessible online. I have once in a while, I'll do an outdoor event with one of the collaborators that I have, and we have done several yoga outdoor events. And I offer that, when they do their outdoor events. But for right now, online is the way we're going to stay for a while.
Sure.
It's great, especially with the people that I'm working with. Sometimes they're in great pain, or sometimes they are less mobile and they want to be in the comfort of their own home, or they don't have accessibility to get to a yoga facility. So it's a way to really be together, even though we can't be in person if that's not possible. So
and I love that it has worked really effectively for you, because I like talking about, how have we, or can we pivot our business? In the pandemic made everyone pivot their business in a way, and it seems to have worked for you, not only for your business model, but for you personally. And that's always something to factor in, when we are, going place to place and running all over town. It takes a toll on us for sure. And I would love for you to share with our audience how you use, the things you teach, especially related to yoga nidra, about pausing, intentional rest, and those sort of things. How do you weave those into your life as a woman, as an entrepreneur, as a human being, and even share with others.
Definitely a work in progress, as always. And I love to say that yoga has provided me with the ability to really live in a way that is more sustainable. And with the therapeutic applications of yoga and yoga nidra, and being able to remember that slowing down and being a bit more in the present moment as opposed to being worried about the past or concerned about the future, that in a state of being present like that can really make a difference. I'm a mom of teenagers. That is required. Working with people one-on-one or in a group, it's important to have sustenance and to be filled up from a perspective first before I can allow the benefits to be shared with others. And so helping on all levels be first, it's that idea of, put on the oxygen mask first, that once I find my way into a state of ease, then that is transferable. And so I think that's really, first comes the practice within, and a dinacharya, what we call daily practice, where in the moments, regardless of what's happening in the day with the kids or my husband or work or any experience, even in the chaos of, other things that are happening culturally and in the world, that the pause is key. And in that, it's breath first. And so a lot of times we'll spend moments where we have to learn how to breathe. So we build that respiratory intelligence first, and then remind ourselves that getting to a point of being consistent and prioritizing self-care. And I think as women who have businesses, that's a really hard thing, because especially in the caretaking industry, we're going to tend to put everybody else first. And that's how burnout happens. And that's how resentment happens. And that's how suffering and misery happens, right? So the idea is to reduce suffering by taking those pauses.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that's a really good point to make. I mean, obviously this is great for everyone, but especially in caretaking professions, whether you're a yoga therapist or a medical professional or, hospice care or retirement, all kinds of different, or just a mom or a dad or that sort of stuff. Because, I'm a mom of a toddler, and, I a dog that's like another toddler. And she's probably what, 12 or 13 now, but it's like, yeah, you're taking care of everybody, you're juggling everything. And even, I'm here in Mexico and I have more help now, but like you're still juggling, you're managing household, you're juggling work and that sort of stuff. And, and I like how you shared like the reality of, if you don't take care of yourself, it leads to burnout. It leads to resentment, frustration, that sort of stuff. And as women, especially, we're trained to do
Absolutely.
This and sacrifice ourselves. And so this is always something really important, because I always want to teach my daughter by way of example, how to rest or put myself first or herself first in the future, and model that. But at the same time, sometimes you feel guilty because as a mom, you're supposed to do this and this and this and this. And so it's an interesting thing. And always, I like to go, always going deeper to these topics, because it's very, very important to shift that programming. And you know, and the intentional rest, the power of the pause, the practice of yoga nidra are all ways to shift that programming, because I'd love for you to share, you know, how does it shift the nervous system, change the, you know, neurological pathways, and on and on and on.
Yes, I could go on and on and on about it because I love that topic and the idea that we are programmed to do and to do more. And there's pressure and there's self pressure that happens, and there's societal pressure or cultural pressure. There's all this kind of what you had mentioned, programming that happens. And we also, I think, tend to try to overcompensate. And I know for a long time I did that because, you know, I'm also trying to like fit into this world of like, well, I have some limitations. How can I still and also not really let the limitations limit me, right? So I think in that, the skill is really redefining what it means to be nourished and to be able to take a pause. And sometimes I think we put pressure on ourselves, like, I have to go to an hour and a half yoga class. And in order to fit that in, then I sacrifice other things. But if we incorporate them in small steps first, and in yoga therapy, we talk of the little steps to change a trajectory is a krama. It cannot happen overnight. In order to get the idea of intentional rest into a habit like brushing your teeth, it requires some redirecting of habits and patterns. And that's what yoga is all about, is kind of reorganizing those habitual ways and finding more appropriate patterns and behaviors.
Yeah, and I would love for you to share. So, you know, the perception of yoga, who doesn't understand yoga as a therapy, is, you know, big movements, you know, vinyasas and that sort of stuff, hot yoga, yada, yada, yada. And, you know, the media portrays yoga as that too. Yes. And so, you know, people don't know, that's what they think. And I have found, and I know you understand this, the most subtle yoga being used as yoga as a therapy is the most profound and the most capable of changing that trajectory. And they are, it can be very, very simple. Yeah. And I've seen, you know, when I've worked with veterans, I mean, just the profound changes. I'd love for you to share a little bit about, you know, what are some examples of the little changes, those little steps, you know, maybe you've done personally, or you can think of someone that might be relevant that, you know, people can start with a little bit and then start to implement, you know, like optimal nidra that we're going to talk about your program into their lives, or some other things, but the little steps first.
Yes. The little steps are so important, like we mentioned before. And how, going back to the idea of the nervous system, remember when we are in that state of doing and that kind of overriding the demands of the body. And the example would be someone who is in the medical profession, maybe even a frontline worker, where they don't institutionally even have time to go to the bathroom. I mean, I think that is partly, I mean, that would be another whole podcast to talk about the infrastructure that causes that. Yeah. But in order to take the smallest step of, oh, I'm dehydrated, I need to take a drink of water, even however that can happen. Or I couldn't sleep last night because I drank 7 cups of coffee yesterday, and maybe that link hasn't been made yet either. So the first step is to kind of be in that ability to have swadhyaya, which is the self-study and observation that's mentioned in the Yoga Sutra. How in reflection upon what our choices are on a day-to-day basis, that's kind of the first step. And then when reactions happen, because we're human, and as we relate to everybody in our way that we will relate, there is that programming that exists. And then being aware of what those responses or reactions are. And that might be the second step is, oh, wait a second. Instead of taking an extra moment and going for a walk today, I chose to, and fill in the blank with something that may not be as productive, to help process cortisol and stress hormones, to reset and re-regulate. And those moments are key. And that's what I really help to empower the people that I work with, that they can begin to recognize for themselves, oh yeah, I found myself in that kind of old way of doing things. And now I'm back to reorganizing that. And again, it takes time, and it takes not just patience, but compassion and a willingness to kind of have feedback too, right? From ourselves and from the people that are in our lives.
Yeah. And I mean, and connecting those dots and even realizing that one action or behavior is affecting another. Like, I know for myself, I mean, as that first step, and then the real awareness, the self-awareness. I love how you put that. Like, I know for myself, I'm not ready to give up my coffee. I have before, but we were having a conversation last night about morning routines, and a friend had given up coffee. She really didn't want to, but she was trying to give it up for some health reasons. And I said, I'm not ready. I'm the mom of a toddler. Like, it's getting me going. But I know that I cannot have it after noon.
Yes.
Or else I will be up. I won't be able to go to sleep. And, and just putting those dots together, I think are key for people.
Yeah.
And it can be so simple. And then having, that self-awareness. And I think in some ways, I think in the Western psychology world, they call it cognitive behavior therapy. Like, they talk about that a little bit. That only comes to mind because I was recently talking with a friend who's a psychotherapist about that. But then, yeah, having subtle practices like yoga therapy to help reinforce and provide a deeper foundation for changing all of this stuff, I think is really helpful.
Yes.
So I'd love for you to share more about the practice of Yoga Nidra, and even specifically, I know Optimal Nidra is a new program that you're launching. And so I'd love for you to share more about that and everything behind it.
Yeah.
and why it's beneficial.
Thank you. I just love all the things that you were saying about how the focus and the attention coming back in is really key. And the reason that Yoga Nidra is helpful is because we're placing intentional attention. And it's something, so in the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, we go through all those 8 limbs. I won't talk about them right now. If you're interested, research it. But the 5th limb is Pratyahara. And Pratyahara is sort of that bridge between all the physical and more gross, tangible parts of our being out in the world and in a yoga practice. And then the more subtle practices of concentration and meditation and ultimately enlightenment. But Pratyahara is that bridge which allows us to not be so impacted by the external forces. When we are in an act of doing, we have that, we have to, on some level, because we are householders and we are in this working world, and yet the moments of coming back in, rather than having all that prana, all the life force and attention going outward, that when it starts to come back inwards, that's when the nervous system resets. The life force of prana can actually fuel the vessel of who we really are. And that's when clarity comes in. And the pieces of that pratyahara are not just settling the nervous system down and being tuned into the breath, but also what we call niyasam, which is the placement of attention. And how we place attention during moments of quiet are what we're really emphasizing in optimal nidra. And it's the methodology and the philosophy and the incorporating of the ancient wisdom that's been around for thousands and thousands of years old that we know as yoga and yoga therapy into how we can function on a level that is more conducive to who we really are. And so all those facets and benefits of rest, that's what we will be exploring in optimal nidra. And it's what I do on a regular basis. It's something that, I found yoga nidra long, long ago, and I find it to be incredibly helpful. Now, it's not for everybody. And it's also something that we take care around, because if you're in a state where you're just still in that go, 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 and then all of a sudden you want to sit down and try and rest, that might not be possible. And it might actually make you more anxious or more worried. And so we want to take those gradual steps and be utilizing ahimsa, which is that quality of non-harming and non-violence, that we can embrace what is possible for intentional rest with the ability to be compassionate and incorporate the ahimsa.
Everything that you're sharing just sounds amazing. I mean, I've practiced yoga nidra myself, but it's always great to have these conversations because they're also great reminders for myself. Because we're all human and trying to juggle things, and so I would love for you to share. How can we learn more about optimal nidra and about you? Of course, we'll put links below, but I'd love for you to share too.
Thank you. Yes. Optimal Nidra is through Optimal State Yoga Therapy School. And our 4-month immersion is coming out starting October 14th. And it incorporates a weekend in October and a weekend in February. And then in between is self-study that I was mentioning earlier. And through Optimal State, you can find the Optimal Nidra, or you could contact Krishna at optimalstate.com or connect through optimalnidra.com on the Yoga Gently website.
Oh, and, wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing and for being in the place that you are, which is supporting the efforts of women in business and in entrepreneurship. And I think that we all need reminders and we all need each other to keep us going. And so accountability partners and, people that help us be reminded that's just really important as we continue the vital work that we do in the world as moms, as business owners, as wives, as, any position that we hold as women in the world. It's time for our wisdom to shine through, and we need to be sustained by intentional rest.
Yes, completely agree. Thank you so much, Sonya, for being on. And I'm so excited for your program and wish you much, much success.
Thank you.